Well, the time has finally come. Super Bowl 48 is finally upon us. And, even as a Bear fan, where most years my team is long since done with their season by the time you get to this point, there is something special about the Super Bowl. There's no question about it. It is that classic piece of Americana, no doubt about it. And to me, this year, you've got a very intriguing, very interesting matchup, a great contrast of organizations, a great contrast of styles, and a great contrast in paths in how they actually got to this point between the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. They share some commonalities and they have some differences. And when you look at the Denver Broncos, this is the top rated offense in the NFL this year. Peyton Manning had a phenomenal season, set all types of passing records. The team scored the most points in NFL history over the course of an entire season for a team. And then you've got the Seattle Seahawks, who are more of that traditional mold of a championship type team where they play phenomenal defense. They have the best defense in the National Football League. They run the ball really well with beast mode Marshawn Lynch. A great, interesting matchup, a great contrast of styles. And one of these rare examples in recent seasons where most people before the season, really deep down in their minds, even like me who didn't want to admit it, knew deep down inside, I think, that the two best teams in the National Football League all year were going to be the Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. And it probably surprises absolutely no one that they've both reached this point. Now, I look at this matchup and I say it's kind of funny to me. I'll point this out that usually your national media, usually the talking heads, are all about defense wins championships, that traditional formula. And, in theory, that would lead you to think that most people are probably picking the Seattle Seahawks to win. But it's amazing how those rules get thrown out of the equation and thrown out the window when Peyton Manning's involved. The national media loves this guy, and it's good for business to protect him, and it's good for business to pipe him up, hype him up, whatever. And you have great storylines on both sides of the football. There's no question about it. There's a prevailing sentiment amongst a lot of people, I'm sure, that they want to see Peyton Manning win another championship. This is going to be his third appearance in the Super Bowl. They want to see him get that second ring. And then on the flip side, you've got the Seattle Seahawks, where I think a lot of people want to see Russell Wilson get a ring. You've got that old school approach of how the quarterback position is supposed to be played with Peyton Manning versus that new school approach of how the quarterback position is going to be played down the road with Russell Wilson. Like I said, a lot of interesting and intriguing storylines here. People like Richard Sherman definitely contributed to helping make the Seahawks kind of the team that America would want to hate and root against. And that, to me, makes the matchup more intriguing as well. You've got a good guy, clearly, versus a bad guy, clearly. And there's nothing wrong with that. It makes it more interesting for everybody involved. I was hoping that this Super Bowl was going to have temperatures in the single digits or the teens, and there was going to be a bunch of rain or a bunch of snow, a horrendous amount of wind, and it was going to teach Roger Goodell and the NFL and their arrogant asses a lesson. Don't have these Super Bowls outside in February in these cold weather climates. Now it looks like we might have okay weather conditions, which is fair because then we don't have to listen to the excuse if the Broncos lost. Well, Peyton Manning couldn't play in those conditions. Da, da, da. It's a level playing field for both sides involved, but it does open a Pandora's box down the road of now Chicago is going to want a Super Bowl, and rightfully so. A place like Philadelphia is going to want a Super Bowl. All these other places are going to want to host Super Bowls at some point in time. And what's the NFL going to say to them? No. Well, you just gave it to New York. So what makes New York so much more special than all of these other places? Now, in terms of the game itself, I would expect this to be a really good, really close, really competitive game. And I think both teams have opportunities to win, but there are certain things they need to do. From the Denver Broncos standpoint, I think the Denver Broncos have to be patient and they have to run the football early and they have to stick with it. Peyton Manning can't do what he did back in the 2009 season in that Super Bowl against the New Orleans Saints, where at the end of the game, he put too much of the burden on himself, shouldered too much of the load on the last drive where you had Joseph Adai was averaging 9 yards a carry. You didn't run the ball one time. And you made one mistake. Tracy Porter pick sixed your ass, and the Super Bowl was over. Can't do that. The Broncos are going to have to stick with the running game early, and they're going to have to stick with the running game often all throughout. They need to deploy Noshawn Moreno. They need to bring in some Monte Ball. They need to run the ball because in this type of case, they're playing a really, 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 really good defense, the best defense in the National Football League. If you become a one-dimensional team, I don't care how great that one dimension is. If you're Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos, eventually the Seattle Seahawks are going to force some mistakes out of you. And as a result, it could be a long day at the office. As far as the Denver Broncos offensively, I think one thing they have to realize is that Richard Sherman is going to take somebody out of the equation. But I feel like you have the chance to control who he takes out of the equation. In passing situations, in my opinion, unless the Seahawks change how they conduct business and they have a Richard Sherman follow a Demaryius Thomas or a Julius Thomas anywhere on the field, he's going to stay at his left cornerback position. As a result, to me personally, I'd minimize the impact on the game from him, and I'd stick Andre Caldwell on the outside. Force the Seahawks to adjust. Force the Seahawks to adjust to what you are doing. That's what you must do. And then for the Broncos, from a defensive standpoint, they're going to have to get some stops. They might need to force a turnover or two, because I would be completely surprised if the Denver Broncos are just going to be able to move the ball down the field at will consistently on the Seahawks. I think they're going to have those drives where they do piece it together and they have those nice long kind of ball control drives, especially if they keep the running game involved early and often. But I would highly doubt that the Broncos are going to have a bunch of big explosive plays. Now for the Seattle Seahawks, some of their keys to victory. Marshawn Lynch is going to have a huge game. Time of possession is going to be critical. One way to negate the greatness of Peyton Manning is to keep him off the field as much as possible. You could look back at the philosophy of Bill Parcells and the New York Giants in Super Bowl 25. How did you counteract Jim Kelly in that K-gun, no-huddle offense? You kept them off the field. That's what he did with Otis Anderson. They pounded the ball, they pounded the ball, they pounded the ball, they pounded the ball. The Bills were hardly ever on the field offensively. That's what you have to do here. You're going to have to control the clock. You're going to have to control the time of possession. And sometimes you're going to have to play that defense and field position style of football. Make the Denver Broncos uncomfortable. Limit their chances and opportunities to score. You're going to need Percy Harvin to come in and be a difference maker. They gave up a number of draft picks to get a guy like Percy Harvin for a moment like this, and he's really done nothing for them in 2013. But now is a chance here in the Super Bowl. They have the ability to get back an explosive weapon that can do all types of different things on the offensive side of the football, and the Seahawks are going to need that. This is one game. This is one moment. You can never be too arrogant to believe that you're automatically going to make it back the next year. For all you know, this might be your one chance as an organization, your one chance to win a world championship with this team in the way it is currently constructed. You have to deploy Percy Harvin in the return game. You have to deploy him out of the slot. You have to use him some out of the backfield. Anything and everything till the wheels fall off. And then Russell Wilson, in terms of the offense for the Seahawks, he's going to have to make some big plays. And he's going to have to make some plays with his arm. And he's also going to have to make some plays with his feet. Defensively, for the Seahawks, what they have to do is two things. One, they have to be able to generate a consistent pass rush with their front four. They must. Because if you allow Peyton Manning to sit back there and pick you apart and allow him to keep his jersey clean, he is going to pick you apart. You must generate a pass rush with your front four, or no more than 5 pass rushes, so that way you can drop 6 or 7 consistently into coverage. Because no matter how great you are in the case of a Peyton Manning, if you have to always throw into double coverage or you have to throw into tight zones, your window of opportunity to have successful plays narrows dramatically. It does. When I look at this game, you could definitely make arguments for either team winning. Now, to me, this matchup reminds me a lot of back in the 2007 season when the Giants faced off with the Patriots. The Patriots had that record-setting offense. They had Tom Brady. A lot of people slept on the New York Giants. They said, well, their defense is going to have to be dominant, which I don't see, and Eli Manning's going to have to make some big plays, which I don't see happening. Except it did happen. The Giants generated consistent pass rush with their front four, got in Tom Brady's face early and often, really disrupted the rhythm of that Patriots offense. They got very physical with their wide receivers. They did so many things wonderfully in that game defensively. And then you look at it from the offense standpoint, Eli Manning made big plays when they needed to be made. I'm picking the Seattle Seahawks to win this game because I feel like they are a more balanced, complete team than the Denver Broncos are. I feel like with Russell Wilson, he has the ability to make plays with his arm and then also with his feet. That's something the Denver Broncos do not have with Peyton Manning, who can make just a ton of plays with his arm. I think the Seahawks are a better running football team. Sure, they don't have nearly the weapons in the passing game, but I think Russell Wilson can step up and make the big plays at the big moments. And I'm going to stick to that formula in this case of defense going over offense in the big time games. I know I've said before that the game is changing and but in this moment, in this opportunity, I like the Seahawks matchup against the Denver Broncos. I really do, in part because I have full confidence in the Seahawks to be able to generate a lot of pressure with 4 men on the front line and maybe only one blitzer. If they can do that and they can get in Peyton Manning's face and they can force a turnover too, and when the Broncos, because they'll have some nice long ball controlled drives with a sustained movement down the field. If you're able to take those big 8-9 minute drives that the Broncos are going to have a few of in this game, and you could take them from scoring touchdowns to holding them to field goals, you're keeping the game close enough for Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, and that Seahawks offense. And I think that's going to happen. I actually wouldn't be surprised if this game came down to Russell Wilson and he found a way to win it. I'm going to take the Seattle Seahawks to win 23-20. So that's 23-20. My most valuable player is going to be Russell Wilson. I could be right. I could be wrong. But I do look forward to watching Super Bowl 48 tonight. I think it should be a fun game. And I look forward to seeing some of the commercials, even though we've seen most of them already.